All right, folks. We have an audible here at the Voice of College Football. Mark Rogers just has a little life complication. It's nothing too serious. Like he gave me a code to log in here. So like if he's able to do that, like no one's bleeding, no one's suffering severely. But Mark has to tend to a little situation. We don't need to know what it is. So he'll be joining the show a little bit later. So this is unpredictable. But welcome to the Voice of College Football, Notre Dame week, the USC show, and this is this little plot twist here at the start of the show, as unpredictable as Corey Foreman dropping into pass coverage and making the interception, which seals USC's win over UCLA. Pure Hollywood at the Rose Bowl. You just cannot make that stuff up. You like the script, if you turn it into a movie house, they'd say, nah, come on, that's just way too over the top. That is absurd. Like, give me a more realistic script than Corey Foreman getting the call from Alex Grinch late in the game. Save us, save our season, save this last possession with UCLA and Dorian Thompson-Robinson driving to win the game. UCLA's already scored 45 points, and I've just been shredding USC's defense. Corey Foreman, save us. Corey Foreman, whom USC fans have been waiting for to produce for the longest time. And, he's been injured. So, like, it's not as though he's been lazy. It's not his work ethic, but injuries and then just, not quite hitting that learning curve the way USC fans expected. Wasn't able to play a ton of snaps, wasn't able to make really huge top-line contributions that you would expect or hope for as a USC fan, given all the hype that accompanied his recruitment by Dante Williams under Clay Helton. Corey Foreman saves the day for the USC Trojans. Really rather remarkable. So Alex Grinch had the vision. He had the awareness to call Corey Foreman's number. And then Corey Foreman is able to step up and not only make the huge play, but to do it in pass coverage, not as a rush end, which is his position on the roster. So that is a plot twist. And the interception, it was not a garden variety interception. It was not a normal ball. This was a great interception, leaping, extending his arms to make the play. And thanks to Tony Altimore for changing the graphics on the screen, which I had no idea how to do. That's a nice getting things in order there. So thank you, Tony. But this was an above average play. It's Corey Foreman not making an impact as an edge rusher, but in pass coverage. Alex Grinch, coming up with the bolt of inspiration. Just a remarkable turn of events to save USC's season, to send the Trojans to the Pac-12 championship game, and to also ruin UCLA's year. Just the whole platter, the full meal during this Thanksgiving week. It was the turkey dinner with all the trimmings and the pie and the ice cream and the premium beverage. It was everything. So Corey Foreman, the plot twist that no one ever could have anticipated, nailing it down for USC. A few things to unpack about this, and I wrote about this at Trojans Wire earlier on Monday. One thing that has to be said, in the Colorado game, Corey Foreman made some big plays in the backfield early in that game. And hey, yeah, it's Colorado, all right? That's basically like, playing varsity, playing junior varsity. But that's one of the things about sports, is that sometimes you might be playing really inferior opposition, but what matters is not the caliber of opponent. What matters is the guy, the athlete, the person in the arena making a good play and saying internally to himself, it's really about more himself than anyone else. Hey, I can make good plays. Hey, this thing can work. Hey, I'm on the right track. And Alex Grinch also was able to go on film after the Colorado game and say, hey, Corey Foreman, you're actually pretty good. Hey, Corey Foreman, you're on the right track. And all these little things, you think, okay, it's a Colorado game. Who cares? This, UCLA is the big leagues, this elite offense. You think it's just going to be a totally different step up in weight class. But like the light went on for Corey Foreman, and he certainly grew in confidence. And Alex Grinch was able to see something in him. So it's all those little things that go into the anatomy of a totally unexpected play that's going to change how Corey Foreman sees himself, how his teammates see him, and maybe now he's going to add even a lot more value, and we get a late season surge for him in this Notre Dame game, in the Pac-12 championship game. So really a wonderful story from Corey Foreman, authored by him. And USC fans, I don't know if you saw the work. I'm sure many of you did. Shotgun Spratling, Chris Trevino, the other great journalists who follow USC, in which we use their work. We link to their work at 247 Sports, and also the other outlets. We link to them at Trojans Wire. We give them due credit, for all the great work that they do. I'm sure you've seen the photos of Lincoln Riley bear hugging Corey Foreman after the game. Corey Foreman crying and being emotional. Man, that is just the best. And that's what this is all about. I mean, not to get too sentimental, not to get too cliched here, but when we see all that Corey Foreman's been through, all the struggles, when am I going to make a difference? When am I going to have my moment? When is all the hard work and the perseverance going to pay off? And when is my damn body going to stop barking at me? When am I going to be healthy enough to make big contributions to this team? And then you get this moment. And obviously, it's a huge moment for the team. It's a huge moment for Lincoln Riley. It's a huge moment for the program. It's a huge moment for Mike Bone and Carol Folt and all the people who invested in Lincoln Riley and made such investments in USC football over the past year. The 1-year anniversary is coming up next Monday, November 28th. So it's obviously meaningful for a lot of people, but most of all, it's not just Corey Foreman, the athlete. It's Corey Foreman, a young man. Like this is going to give him confidence for whatever he does in life after his football career. He's going to tell people about this moment. He's going to revel in it, and he's also going to learn. He just did learn something about perseverance. He learned something about sticking with the plan. He learned about hard work. He learned about preparation. This is going to serve him well in life, not just on the field. Okay, again, it might sound corny, it might sound cliche, but like that is a real thing. A young man getting a positive growth moment after a lot of struggle. I mean, that's life stuff. It's not just sports stuff. And it's just a perfect story. It has the Hollywood element. It has an element where, it made USC's season, beating the Bruins, getting to the Pac-12 championship game, but it also means a lot for Corey Foreman, the person. Just the perfect story to carry us into Thanksgiving week, where we sit at the table and give thanks for what we have and for all that we've come through in our own lives to be where we are, hopefully at a good place. So that's the Corey Foreman story. In terms of the bigger picture, Lincoln Riley gets it done in year one. I mean, and there's more to get done. That much is for certain. Like the journey's not done, of course, but one very, very big goal, check mark now, mission accomplished, reached the Pac-12 championship game. Did it in the first year. And may I say that back in the summer, Pac-12 media poll, preseason coaches poll, preseason Associated Press poll, what did they all say? They all picked USC third, all right? So you can do the simple math here. If you're being picked third, you're being picked to miss the Pac-12 championship game. You're not in that top two. So USC has exceeded what all the pundits and all the media voters and the coaches thought about this team in the summer. And if you've watched previous Monday shows here at the Voice of College Football, you know that the general national consensus was 9-3. That was just the general landing spot for what most pundits thought USC's record would be. Some people, yours truly, thought 10-2. Other people thought 8-4. So USC is officially going to eclipse 9-3. This is a team that's 10-1, could be 11-1, but will at least be 10-2 in the 12-game regular season. So really, on several levels, USC with this win over UCLA, and again, journey not done, a lot of business to tend to. Of course, the college football playoff is out there, but let's savor this. Like, let's take a moment to savor this and know how much this team has already overachieved to this point. More work to be done, but this 10th win, getting to the Pac-12 championship game, it definitely represents overachievement for USC. All right, more on the postseason and the road ahead in Notre Dame and the Pac-12 championship game, but let's say a few more things about the UCLA game. One is that, and this puts into perspective how amazing the job is that Lincoln Riley has done in 1 year. Lincoln Riley gets it done in 1 year, taking a 4-8 team, turning it around to 10-1, and getting it to Las Vegas for the Pac-12 title game. On the other side of the coin, UCLA needed 5 years to get to this point. 5 years to get to the point where it's playing UCLA for all the stakes, for all the Tostitos. It took 5 years for UCLA to get to this point. UCLA did not sniff the Pac-12 title the previous 4 years of Chip Kelly's tenure. He needed the fifth year. He needed DTR coming back for a fifth year because of pandemic eligibility. Not many quarterbacks in the history of college football have played 5 straight seasons, because this was not an injury situation. This was the extra year of pandemic eligibility that DTR took. Chip Kelly needed that to build UCLA to this point. He needed grad transfers as well. It's like this was the all-in season for UCLA. This was Chip Kelly's one moment, because if you watch last week's show here on the Voice of College Football with Tony Siracusa, Tony Bruin on Twitter at Last Word on College Football, Tony does a great job, covers Wake Forest, covers the ACC, but also very much, covers UCLA and knows that program inside and out. He said it. He didn't make any bones about it. UCLA is heading for a rebuild next year because they have all this senior talent, all this veteran talent. This was the put all the poker chips in the middle of the table moment for UCLA. And USC's 1 year Lincoln Riley project, with all these transfers, with all these new faces, is able to get the job done against UCLA. UCLA has not won a conference championship since that Cade McNown team in 1998. It's probably going to be at least 30 years, if not longer, for UCLA to win a conference championship, because, so next year's a rebuild, so won't win the Pac-12 next year. And then you get to the Big Ten, and you're going to have to go through Michigan and Ohio State, as well as USC, for UCLA to have any hope of winning the Big Ten. So it just puts into context that, hey, you have UCLA with a quarter-century conference title drought. Winning is not easy, and even when you think things are rolling, as they were for UCLA in the late 1990s under Bob Toledo, taking the baton from Terry Donahue, even when things are rolling, the music can stop. And we've seen it at USC. We felt it at USC. Getting the wrong coaches, getting the wrong fit, getting the lack of institutional and administrative smarts from Pat Hayden, from Mike Garrett, and allowing the program to slide into ruin. The misguided Sark hire, and then, Pat Hayden making Clay Helton permanent head coach before the 2015 Pac-12 championship game against Christian McCaffrey and Stanford. He should have seen what USC could do against Stanford before giving him the keys to the program. But no, Hayden did it after the win over UCLA. He thought that was enough. And, well, we got saddled with Clay Helton for a very long time. But now we have Mike Bone, who delivered Lincoln Riley, and Carol Folt. A lot of USC folks doubted her, and it was understandable. But Carol Folt, proved that she knew what she was doing, and Mike Bone definitely proved that he knew what he was doing. So there is now that word alignment from the president to the athletic director to the head football coach to the football operations piece, and we have it all coming together in 1 year. So it shows that simultaneously everything can come together quickly. We don't have to have 3-year rebuilds. We don't have to have long fix-it-up projects. We can do this in 1 year. And people scoffed at that you can't turn a 4-8 team into a Pac-12 championship game team in 1 year. No, actually you can. If you get everything in alignment, if you get the right coach, and then if you don't have the right alignment, then you go into the wilderness the way UCLA has for so long. And that wilderness experience for UCLA continues. All right. Other thoughts about USC and UCLA. Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Now, he's a baller, and he battles and he fights. But this was the difference between DTR and Caleb Williams. What separates the two? DTR committed 4 turnovers in this game, and Tony Siracusa mentioned last week, and it's entirely accurate of Tony to say this. The reason why DTR was a lot better this year than last year is that we didn't see the crippling mistakes from DTR. He would throw a big interception. He would make a big mistake in previous UCLA seasons. Last year's UCLA-Oregon game in Pasadena, he would make those 1 or 2 really crippling mistakes. And so against Arizona last week, and then here against USC, DTR regressed to his 2021 self at the absolute wrong time. Just seemed to be a little too intent on trying to make something happen instead of letting the game come to him. And that is something that Caleb Williams, he doesn't fall into that trap. Because Caleb Williams is so luminously talented, you will see him make some ambitious throws at times. And he did get intercepted once in this game, but for the season, Caleb Williams still has just 3 interceptions. That's as many interceptions as DTR threw in this game alone. So you still saw, after his 1 early pick and after getting down 14-0, you saw Caleb Williams regroup. You saw him center himself, and you saw him make really good decisions. And it's actually ironic here that if there's anything that Caleb Williams is guilty of, in a certain sense, it's that he's not more aggressive as a runner. So for some running quarterbacks who can run extremely well, their flaw is that they run too early. They abandon the pocket too early. But with Caleb Williams, he's good about staying in the pocket. And if anything, sometimes he stays in the pocket too long. He commits to the pass, to throwing the ball a little too much, and you get into a situation where he actually should take off. And we saw this at the end of the game. If he runs up the middle, it's probably game over. USC probably gets a first down, runs out the clock. DTR doesn't get the ball back. So if anything, Caleb doesn't let loose sometimes as much as he should. And I'm talking specifically about using the running game, because we've seen Caleb Williams run in the open field. I mean, we don't see it too often. Saw it a little bit against Utah. We saw it last year. If you followed Oklahoma last season, he ripped off some big runs against Oklahoma State in the Bedlam game. Caleb Williams can run for 60, 65 yards. That is the kind of athlete he is. And if anything, he's been so committed to playing within Lincoln Riley's structure, playing within Lincoln Riley's offense, that he doesn't let himself loose. Now, part of this is, don't get injured, because as good as Miller Moss might be, you still, if you're USC, you don't want to test out that thesis in a UCLA game late in the season. You do want to preserve yourself. Caleb Williams has been really good about protecting his body. And that's a remarkable amount of maturity for a sophomore. You don't usually see quarterbacks who are that self-aware in terms of their value to the team and, don't get hurt, preserve your body. Caleb Williams is so far advanced. He's so far ahead of many of his peers in terms of protecting himself and showing kind of a big picture view. And so if anything, he sometimes restrains himself as a runner. Might take some risks as a passer, but he restrains himself as a runner. And so on that late play against UCLA, he needed to loosen the chains a little bit and needed to go for it as a runner. He didn't, but hey, there was Corey Foreman to save the day. But that is one of the illustrative differences between Caleb Williams and DTR, that Caleb Williams played within himself a lot more in this game, and DTR's mistakes were crucial, and USC cashed in most of them, not all of them. There was a Dennis Lynch missed field goal. We'll talk about that in a bit. But USC did cash in most of those mistakes, and USC definitely needed the turnovers that DTR provided, and it was one of the defining factors in this game. Other notes from this contest. One is that, Travis Dye injured. All right. That was obviously a big deficit for USC. But what happened? 2 things. One, Austin Jones. He played great. And if you followed the Pac-12, the past 10, 15 years, you know that Stanford has been a nemesis for UCLA. Now, obviously, Stanford lost to UCLA this year because Stanford just isn't good anymore. But on a larger level, like Stanford has really bothered UCLA over the past decade. It beat the Bruins in a Pac-12 championship game in 2012, dealt UCLA a very damaging loss in 2014, which frankly, the Bruins, since that moment in 2014, it took them 8 years to really get back to a good position late in a Pac-12 season. So Stanford's bothered UCLA a lot. And so Austin Jones basically carried forth that tradition of Stanford bothering UCLA, played a complete game. Obviously, people will look at over 100 rushing yards for Austin Jones, and the production that he gave as a running back. But let's remember, Lincoln Riley didn't play Austin Jones a lot this season because he didn't block as well as Travis Dye. He didn't pass protect as well as Travis Dye. We didn't really see big issues, big problems with Austin Jones as a pass protector, as a blocker. He really elevated his whole game, not just as a running back. And of course, one of the ironies of all of this with Austin Jones is that because he wasn't as evolved as a pass protector and as a blocker early in the season, which led him to not get as many snaps, to not get as many carries, to not get as much live action as Travis Dye did. The irony there is that left him fresh for this UCLA game. Lincoln Riley was able to entrust him with a bigger workload, and he was able to handle that workload. And that might not have happened if he had been getting a lot more carries over the past 2.5 months. Funny how it all works out. Funny how the economy of a season and the economy of a workload worked to Austin Jones and USC's benefit. So that was one way in which the Trojans compensated for the absence of Travis Dye. And the other thing was Jordan Addison back at full strength. And so, Austin Jones had to replace Dye as a runner, but Jordan Addison also needed to give USC that home run capability, that field stretching capability in the passing game. 11 catches, 178 yards. He was the baddest dude on the field. He was an elite receiver. USC got him back at full strength. The Trojans needed that. And UCLA's secondary had to devote so much attention to Jordan Addison that Kyle Ford was then able to get open. Taj Washington was then able to make some plays. Other receivers were able to also contribute in the passing game, but Jordan Addison unlocked those opportunities, which enabled Caleb Williams, before all was said and done, to throw for 470 yards on a night when USC rolled up 649 yards of offense, and yet left points on the field. That is the scary part about this USC offense. But Jordan Addison clearly was able to step into the void and give USC an elite playmaker to compensate for the absence of Travis Dye. So without Jordan Addison, does USC win this game? I don't think so. And so it was just in time, and it reinforces a key point that these previous few weeks, Arizona, Cal, Colorado, USC wasn't at full strength, but USC didn't have to be at full strength. It was all about getting ready for UCLA, marshaling the resources, and being able to make sure that players were ready for this game. Now, Mario Williams and Eric Gentry, as it turned out, not ready for this game, not fully physically fit, not fully physically ready, but there were enough returning pieces to make the difference for USC. So Jordan Addison was one of them. We also have to focus on the offensive line. Andrew Voorhees and Bobby Haskins, they had been banged up to varying degrees. They were moderately hurt. I mean, no severe injuries, but they were reduced in strength and overall effectiveness in the previous few weeks. Lincoln Riley, said, or at least hinted at, both of them being close to full strength, being a lot better in their overall progression and how they looked in practice over the past week. That certainly made a difference. You got both Voorhees and Haskins part of the mix on the offensive line. So USC was as close to fully healthy, fully operational on that offensive line compared to early September. You had something really close to your 5 starters all rocking and rolling on that offensive front. So that was also a very key central component of USC's offense being able to function at a high level and outscore DTR in a shootout. So that's all part of the picture. That's all part of the economy of success for USC against UCLA. 66 lucky dude. I'm trying to field your comments here after getting all this information out of my system. 66 lucky dude makes the important point. With that said, how fresh is Darwin Barlow? He's running like a man. Yes, and again, being fresh. Not getting many carries with Travis Dye and also Austin Jones locking it down for most of the season. And so, yeah, Barlow was that closer. He was like the relief pitcher that you bring in for 6 outs in the 8th inning. Your starter gives you 6 innings, and then you get through the 7th. Maybe you get through a really tight spot, and then you bring in your closer to get 6 outs in the 8th and 9th. That was Darwin Barlow. 2 great runs to give USC its final touchdown and what turned out to be the winning points. And so, credit Riley. Like maybe he thought that Austin Jones either was a little bit spent or just that UCLA needed to see something new. Like that was a curveball that he could throw. A lot of baseball metaphors here, but they all apply pretty well. So give Lincoln Riley credit for using Darwin Barlow late in this game to make a difference for USC. And while we're talking about coaches using players, talked about Alex Grinch having the foresight to use Corey Foreman. We talked about Lincoln Riley, having the foresight to use Darwin Barlow, another USC coach who has really shown great care and wisdom in terms of juggling players. Josh Henson, the offensive line coach. So having mentioned that Andrew Voorhees and Bobby Haskins were close to full strength for this game, you got to give it up to Josh Henson guiding this offensive line because he was able to juggle the workloads, and he had to sprinkle in a little bit of Mason Murphy in these Arizona, Colorado weeks. He had to work in Gino Quinones a little bit at times during the season. Like Henson really calibrated well just how much rest he had to give to various offensive linemen, and being able to sit them out for just enough games so that they would get just enough strength back for the UCLA game. I mean, it was a real juggling act in terms of not just where to slot people in along the offensive line. That was part of it, but it's also, how much do we risk playing versus not playing players? Like how much can we get away with in the non-big game weeks against the Arizonas, Cals, and Colorados of the world versus the other point, how much time do we need to get them on the field so that they are reasonably sharp against UCLA? So striking that balance of not pushing them too hard to keep them fresh, but also giving them enough reps that they don't get stale and they don't lurch into bad habits. A lot of juggling considerations there for Josh Henson, and he really played his cards right, and he deserves a lot of credit. So many good performances, not just from the players and from Lincoln Riley, but also from this coaching staff. That definitely has to be mentioned as part of this larger picture. So, and yes, Roger Dodger. Bobby Haskins, the Virginia transfer, has a really emotional game. Yes. And it was, Corey Foreman hugging Lincoln Riley. Man, that really hit you in the gut. Also, Bobby Haskins, a very, very emotional moment for him after this game, obviously helping his USC teammates and helping USC win a huge game against UCLA. But a part of Bobby Haskins' heart and mind were in Charlottesville during this absolutely devastating, sad, tragic week. That was definitely another centrally powerful moment from this USC experience against UCLA. All right, let's talk some playoff. Now, before I'll just deal with this first, but then I have some bigger thoughts about the college football playoff. So Mark Edwards, if TCU loses and USC loses another game, what are the odds the Big Ten gets 2 into the CFP? Well, so Mark, I think everyone can readily agree that if Michigan Ohio State is just like this absolute classic game, this absolutely amazing game, and it comes down to a 2-point conversion at the very end, and you get these other plot twists, we might have something wild happen with two Big Ten teams getting in. But like that's a needle in a haystack. Like we have to see how Michigan Ohio State plays out. We have to see how the other games play out. But and I see that Mark Rogers is backstage, so he'll be able to join the show. But before Mark comes on, let me just say about the playoff that this is a really fascinating thing here for USC, because before the season and even during the season, the early parts of the season, I was very clear in saying this, and I was not alone among national pundits that this was not a year to expect the playoff. All right, just too thin on defense, too many flaws in the roster, too much to overhaul. Like all the skepticism that visited USC early in the season and in the off season, that was directed toward, this team's not even going to win 10 games. This team isn't going to even make the Pac-12 championship game. I thought USC could do those things, but I thought that all that skepticism was more properly applied to the higher standard of could USC make the playoff. That's where I agreed with the skepticism that, getting all the way to the playoff in 1 year, that was asking too much. So it's a really tricky emotional dynamic for USC right now, because people are going to tell each USC player, hey, you win 2 games, you're in the playoff. And so it's going to be very easy for USC players to think, oh, well, now we have the playoff, and if we don't get there, it's a disappointment. And that is the road to ruin. USC has just been doing great, playing its own game, just relishing the process of growing and achieving and pursuing the Pac-12 title. Like, the USC's first 2 non-conference games, Rice and Fresno State, like you're not thinking about the national picture. But now Notre Dame, stepping outside the conference, but playing Notre Dame, primetime, Chris Fowler, Kirk Herbstreit, ABC. There's going to be all the playoff hype. There's going to be all the playoff-related drama. But this should just be, hey, let's beat the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And let's just keep on winning. Let's keep on improving. Let's keep on growing. Let's keep on showing how good we are. I worry that if USC thinks, it's the playoff and we have to win and we have to get there, if something negative happens against Notre Dame, the team might not respond the way it did against UCLA, falling behind 14-0. If Notre Dame gets off to a great start, I'm worried that the playoff talk, the playoff component, which is now front and center for USC, at least in terms of the media spotlight, that could hijack their performance. And Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch need to keep them focused on, hey, this is Notre Dame. The Irish are coming to LA for the first time in 4 years because we didn't have a game in LA in 2020. Let's just beat those Irish. Let's just send a message to the Irish. Let's just keep it in terms of this rivalry, this storied rivalry that we get to play. Riley and Grinch need to keep that tunnel vision, and they need to instill that into their players. And as we know, if you win, the results take care of themselves. Just focus on the task, but it's going to be a real mental, psychological challenge for USC. And so with that, welcome Mark Rogers to the Voice of Football. I never thought I would introduce you, but here we are.
I'm appreciative to you.
As unpredictable as Corey Foreman dropping back in pass coverage and making the game-sealing play against UCLA. You just can't predict life.
Well put. Well put. Great correlation there. Matt, thank you so much for getting this started. And while I was not able to get here on time, so applause. And
Tony fixed up the graphics. Like he just parachuted in, got the graphics fixed. So
I was going to say, I was highly impressed with the graphics display that you've pulled off here. The point that you just hit on, I think, is an amazing point in regards to the transformation of the focus of fans, and it's probably permeated to the players in terms of this hyper focus about playoff. What does this mean for the playoff? Like we could be playing, X, Y, and Z school this week that is completely faceless to us otherwise. But if it means something toward the playoff, that's more important than playing Notre Dame, whereas generations ago, and even, we talk about some of the great landmark games in this series, and we think probably most recently, the one that comes to mind is, of course, 2005. That was still about Notre Dame and USC.
Yes, it was.
And not what the implications were. Those were kind of in the background. So that's a tremendous point that you made, that it kind of just hit me in a different way right then.
And it's important to note about the 2005 game, because it was in South Bend, it was in mid-October.
Yeah.
So like it was just so early in the season that you're not thinking, well, about the 1 versus 2 in the BCS title game. It was mid-October. Like it's just beat the other guy because it's in mid-October. But when you play in LA at the end of the season, yeah, it hits very different because it's right before the conference championship game. And for Notre Dame, it's the end of the Irish's regular season slate. And so, the big game in this series, at least in the past 40 years, which was in LA, which had national championship implications, was 1988. 1 versus 2, Tony Rice versus Rodney Peete in the Coliseum. So it's been 34 years since we've had USC and Notre Dame playing in the Coliseum at the end of the regular season with supreme national championship implications. I mean, in 2006, USC had just lost to UCLA, so that you didn't have the same type vibe for that game, and Notre Dame was not unbeaten, so it was not a top line national championship playing game for both teams. But the 88 was the playing game for both teams. 2002, both teams were really good, but also were not part of the national championship mix. Ohio State and Miami, were on that collision course that year. So you do have to go back to 88 for the last time a USC Notre Dame game in the Coliseum had top line national championship implications for both teams involved. So you don't have quite that here, with only USC being in the national title picture, being in the playoff picture. But, this is Lincoln Riley's first game against Notre Dame. And so, like, if I'm him, I'm saying, like, I want to get off to a good start against the Irish. I want to be 1-0 against the Irish. So, like, that should be the foremost point of focus. And the other thing is just, like, this team, there's still so much room to grow. Like, I made the point earlier in this broadcast, Mark, before you came on, that USC scored 48 against UCLA and left a lot of points on the field. Dennis Lynch missing 2 field goals under 35 yards. You had Brendan Rice dropping another pass. Like, he drops one every week. And, that's on Lincoln Riley for keeping him out there. Like, he needs to be benched, and he needs, the Kyle Ford, Taj Washington, Michael Jackson. They don't drop passes. They need to be ahead of Rice in the wide receiver rotation. But anyway, the larger point being that USC could be a 60-point per game offense. Now, it's not going to score 60 against Marcus Freeman's defense, but the larger point stands that USC is putting up big numbers and still is leaving 10, 13, 17 points per game on the field. And so if this team can stop leaving 13, 17 points on the field, well, you look at how Georgia played against Kentucky, not very well at all. That was a really ugly game, and Georgia's offense is certainly vulnerable. Like, I'm no longer thinking that if it's USC Georgia in the Peach Bowl, like, of course I'm picking Georgia, but I don't think it's an absolute lock. Giving Lincoln Riley a month to prepare and seeing that Georgia's offense is capable of pulling a clunker, or at least, it's less than fully efficient. Like, I'm not treating that game as a lock anymore. I certainly would have done so, a month ago, but I'm not really quite there now. But yet I kind of feel guilty for even mentioning that, because, like, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I don't want to be talking about the playoff. It's really about Notre Dame, and in addition to this week being about Notre Dame and USC not getting distracted, there's also just the matter of USC is in a real feast or famine situation. Obviously, USC's done a lot of feasting to this point, and it's 10-1, and it's going to be in the Pac-12 championship game no matter what. So a lot of goals already achieved, but still. So USC, because it has a 13th game to play before the Bowls, so everyone wants, but also you could go 1-1. And you could go 0-2. Now, if you go 2-0, you go to the playoff. But if you go 0-2, USC probably falls all the way out of the New Year's Six. I mentioned last week on the show that, if USC splits UCLA Notre Dame, should be in decent shape for the New Year's Six. But of course, by beating UCLA, you now add another game. So like it was kind of too complicated to think about a 3-game sequence before the third game had been earned, before the third game was officially part of the schedule. So now we're truly in a 2-game sequence. There will be 2 more games for USC before the bowls. And so if USC loses both games to Notre Dame and in the Pac-12 title game, could fall out of the New Year's Six. I'd say probably would, just because if you're dropping 2 games in a row like that probably takes you out of the top 12. I mean, Tennessee fell a pretty long way, just getting blown out in 1 game by South Carolina. So if USC loses twice, it probably goes to the Alamo Bowl. I mean, it probably misses the New Year's Six entirely. And so really, after a season with so many accomplishments and so many achievements, it's really important to at least win one of these next 2 games to get to the New Year's Six. And people are going to be talking about the playoff and talking about running the table. Again, we all want that. We all hope for that. But you really want to knuckle down and make sure you bag at least one of these 2 wins, because then the floor is the Cotton Bowl. If USC splits the last 2, the floor is the Cotton Bowl, the ceiling's the Rose Bowl. You really want to make sure that you walk away with that. You do not want to be going to the Alamo Bowl after all that USC has achieved this season. So that's another reason why, the playoff talk just can't be allowed to filter too much into the ears of the players. Of course, it's going to be there. Like, you can't block it out. You can't eliminate it. But like Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch really have a very big task keeping this team focused on the goal at hand. Now, I think Caleb Williams is going to really help a lot because, as I mentioned earlier on this show, he's good at playing within himself. Like he's not, sometimes he'll make a risky throw the way every quarterback does, but like he's not especially reckless. He does try to stick with plays. He really tries to stick to Lincoln Riley's structure. He's not reckless the way DTR was for UCLA in this past game. So I think that restraint that Caleb Williams has already cultivated as a sophomore is going to serve USC well on offense. But on defense, maybe guys are going to try to make hero plays instead of staying in their lanes, staying in their gaps. And given the way Notre Dame has improved on the offensive line in recent weeks, I can see USC being very undisciplined in its run fits and Notre Dame, mashing USC and controlling the ball for 38 minutes and checking a lot of the boxes the Irish need to win this game. So USC really needs to be task-oriented on defense, not being caught out of position, which we've seen so much over the past month. It's going to be really interesting to see if Alex Grinch can get his guys focused against a team that, he knows they're going to have to run the ball. You don't want Drew Pine chucking the ball, several dozen times. You want to be able to mash with the running game and then use play action with short passes to the tight ends. Michael Mayer in particular, it's going to require a lot of discipline for USC to not get caught on a pendulum in terms of, overrunning the running plays and biting on play action. It's going to be a different kind of test relative to UCLA, but it doesn't mean it's going to be an easier test. It's just going to be a very different one. And if you're thinking about the playoff and you're thinking about, how much there is to lose instead of just treating this Notre Dame game as an opportunity, like that's how the roof can cave in for the USC defense, and this Notre Dame opportunity can fall apart.
As they say, styles make the matchup. And in this one in particular, it's intriguing to me because on the surface, you would think, well, USC just has too much explosive firepower on offense to be held down to a place where they're going to be scoring in the Notre Dame range. But I don't generally think that that's going to be the case. I think that this is I don't know what the point spread is on this game. I got to think maybe USC is a 4 to 6 point favorite.
4 points, I think.
Okay. That again, with what Notre Dame has shown us against better competition in recent weeks, they want to limit Drew Pine to his 13 to 17 pass attempts and really play within themselves. And they are a rock solid offensive line. And that's what they've been built upon during the latter portion of Brian Kelly's tenure and on into Marcus Freeman. And then that front seven on defense. They have less of a path or a margin for error, I believe. USC can play a bit of a loose game just because they can they can get on that roll. Look at the UCLA game. The offense was so out of sync for what seemed in the moment to be a considerable period of time in that game, but it really didn't turn out to be. And it's 14-0. And Matt, I had to pull myself back into thinking for a few minutes that DTR was the better of the two quarterbacks. And I had to be like, Mark, don't overreact to watching 10 passes. But I was thinking, man, DTR, he is on fire. He's looking sharp. And Caleb Williams is a little scattershot at this point. But yeah, it was a remarkable game. And I know that you've moved on from UCLA, but I would want to get your historical perspective on one thing in particular, just as you catalog through your mind the great USC UCLA games. And we know that in the aftermath of many of these games, the greatness placed on them has to do with the end result of the season. So, of course, if USC would go on to a playoff spot or really, conclude this season in grand style, then more emphasis is going to be placed on what was just a great football game in and of itself. But, where do you place this among the great USC UCLA games of all time?
I mean, and it has to rate pretty high. And it's not just that they were battling for a spot in the Pac-12 championship game, but also one of the things I mentioned earlier before you came on was that, UCLA was building to this for 5 years. Like USC needed a 5th year of DTR under Chip Kelly and also bringing in grad transfers to get to this point. So like this was like a push all the poker chips to the center of the table moment for UCLA. And like you didn't have this kind of storyline, this kind of backdrop in the John Robinson, Terry Donahue era with a 5th year quarterback, a guy playing 5 collegiate seasons. That was, you couldn't have that then. You could have it here in the pandemic era of college football. And you also didn't have a transfer portal back then. So like the reconfigured nature of both these rosters with Lincoln Riley being there in year 1, trying to make his statement right away, and Chip Kelly and DTR, riding into battle one last time. It's a really unique backdrop going in, and then to see the game that actually happened, and the emotional fallout from every USC UCLA game when the stakes are high is considerable. I mean, imagine what 1967, still really the most important USC UCLA game ever. The emotional fallout from that one was supreme. This rates pretty highly in terms of how elated the winner is for winning and how crushed the loser is for losing, because UCLA is not going to be relevant next year and probably will need several years to recover from this. And whereas it really feels like that launching pad moment where, this was year 1. This was Chip Kelly's big chance to get Lincoln Riley. Yet Lincoln Riley is saying, nope, Chip, I run this show and I'm going to continue to run it. So there really are some fascinating big picture dimensions to this game that you don't have and didn't have for a lot of the Terry Donahue, John Robinson battles of the late 1970s and early 1980s. So 1981 is a particularly memorable UCLA USC game. You had Marcus Allen, Heisman Trophy winner for the Trojans, UCLA trying to get into the Rose Bowl, and Norm Johnson, a great NFL kicker, had a great career, but that last field goal was blocked, sending Don James and the Washington Huskies into the 1982 Rose Bowl against the Iowa Hawkeyes. So like the 81 game certainly stands out as something with a lot of resonance and a real gut punch feel for the winner and the loser. 1988, Rodney Peete versus Troy Aikman. That was a very celebrated and hyped USC UCLA game going in, and Rodney Peete gets it done. A true Trojan warrior. So that one's special for USC on a number of levels. And of course, UCLA had its own moments with Terry Donahue turning the tide in that rivalry in the 1980s. But so those are some of the installments of this rivalry. But like this game, not just in terms of the theater and the entertainment value, but the impact on the winner and the loser, it rates pretty high up on the scale of USC UCLA games in terms of the impact felt on both sides of this rivalry. And this is something that the rivalry had been missing. And I wrote, before the game during the week at Trojans Wire, that this was the most significant one since 2005, UCLA coming in with 1 loss, USC being unbeaten. but that game was a total blowout, 66-19, totally forgettable, men against boys. This was, that close, taut, thrilling game. And you felt down to the very end that UCLA had a chance once Caleb Williams failed to get that first down on USC's late possession. I mean, I was thinking, you advantage UCLA. I tweeted it out. In fact, I got advantage UCLA at the very end when DTR had the ball. And then in comes Corey Foreman, the hero we never knew we needed.
And also maybe a missed opportunity going forward, considering the change in conference structure coming up, because I think there's an expectation that USC is going to march into the Big Ten, take its place next to Ohio State, and have a, titanic battle for supremacy in the Big Ten, while UCLA, really nice program, great potential, but this is one of two final opportunities to beat USC in what could be a Pac-12 championship situation, and then march on to while there's less certainty that they're going to go into the Big Ten and be able to be a prominent member of the Big Ten.
Absolutely. Like this was like if we don't get this was an if not now when moment for UCLA football. I mean, and that's not said with any kind of disdain or hatred or dislike. It's not meant to laugh at UCLA. That's just the reality of UCLA's situation, that, hadn't sniffed anything the past several years, had this chance with DTR taking a 5th year of eligibility, but then knowing that a rebuild is around the corner. I mean, that's just the logistical, structural fact of this game for UCLA, that we're all in for this year. We're probably not going to be able to do much in the coming years. This is when we have to do it. And USC was able to lock them outside the party.
Matt, in fact, we do have a Notre Dame guest stopping by here. We got Nathan Urbach from Golden Domers podcast. Nathan, we appreciate you stopping by. How you doing tonight? Oh, we can't hear you. Oh, there he goes. So hopefully Nathan can make it back. Obviously,
get the sound. Yeah, get the sound worked out.
Okay. All right. That said, don't know if we have any other. Let's give Nathan another shot here. Nathan, how you doing tonight?
Hey guys, I'm doing all right. How are you?
Doing well. Doing well. Appreciate you stopping by to give Notre Dame perspective on this one.
Thanks
Mark,
for
you got to remember, it's the Golden Homers, not
Golden
the Golden
Homers. My bad. There you go. It's been a long time.
No,
apologies. Well, Nathan, you know what the perception on Notre Dame football has been, and regardless of how much of a turnaround we've witnessed and how it could conclude, those losses against Marshall and Stanford really were perplexing, to say the least. But as you take us through Marcus Freeman's first voyage there in South Bend, taking the rough start into account, where do you think this team stands?
Yeah, so I mean, the way I've kind of described the season is the team's been kind of bipolar for the most part. So like they play, like when they play some of these, I mean, I don't want to say bad opponents necessarily, but when they play some of the, the weaker teams on their schedule, they've kind of played down to them. And then when you look at their, the teams that they've played that are better, UNC, Ohio State, obviously Clemson, Syracuse obviously was ranked when they played, BYU, same thing, was ranked when they played them. They played much better, and obviously, and then you get the Boston College game this week, where they kind of finally put things together against one of those teams that haven't had a good season. So, overall, I mean, the team has a lot of talent. It's really been a kind of a bummer just because of the quarterback position and some other factors, at play. And, I'm sure Marcus Freeman's first year as the head coach, some other things, factor into that as well. But, the team can pretty much hang with anybody if they have their best day. If they're running the ball well, the offensive line's playing well, the defense is fine. And then obviously, you have Drew Pine not turning the football over, or something like that, and just kind of playing a normal game. They can pretty much hang in there with pretty much anybody that they would play outside of maybe a college football playoff team. That's kind of my perception of the team overall. But no, it's been an interesting ride, and it's obviously ended on a pretty positive note. And I think even if they were to lose to USC and kind of finish the season 8-4, most Notre Dame fans are pretty excited about what's with the future to come for under Marcus Freeman.
So Nathan, the two games I'm interested in terms of serving as a comparison or kind of a measuring stick relative to USC, Ohio State and Clemson. Like those are the other two really big name opponents that Notre Dame has played this season. And of course, the Ohio State game, that's going to be a comparison point in the Heisman race with you have Caleb Williams and CJ Stroud both playing Notre Dame. So that's going to be just an obvious Heisman component. So when you look at how Notre Dame played Ohio State and CJ Stroud and played them extremely well, what has changed, if anything, for Notre Dame's defense? Like this is the strength of the team. Like the drama has been almost entirely on the offensive side of the ball. You got great defense. You also have great special teams with Brian Mason, but focusing on the defense and how it contained CJ Stroud and Ohio State's offense in week one. Like, how much can we carry over from a week one game going up against Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley? Like, how much is there really to carry over from the beginning of the season here to the end of the season in terms of the expectations for this Notre Dame defense?
I mean, the Notre Dame defense has been pretty steady all year. I think the one thing that, at least from the question marks going into the season and how they played against Ohio State, you got to look at the secondary. I mean, I don't know if you guys have talked about this yet. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to listen at the beginning of the show, but Benjamin Morrison, who's a true freshman corner for Notre Dame, has 5 interceptions on the season. 3 of those came against Boston College, 2 came against Clemson. And he kind of took over the starting role about maybe a fourth or maybe kind of halfway through the season, I guess. And he's just been a stalwart there. So a really good player. And then across the secondary after that, they just have a bunch of veterans. So that's kind of been the biggest thing for them, is getting that secondary to be able to compete against these teams who do have terrific, not only quarterbacks, but wide receiver play. And that's obviously something that USC has. It's something that North Carolina has, and they did pretty well. If you look at North Carolina, the stats in that game, Drake May didn't throw for a high percentage. He had some yardage, he had some touchdowns, but they kind of held him in check from a completion percentage standpoint. And that's sort of a similar thing against Ohio State. They kind of kept the Ohio State in check for the majority of the game. And then towards the end of the game, when Notre Dame's defense got a little bit tired because their offense didn't really do the work, they were essentially able to run all over them in the fourth quarter. And that's how they put up their points. They didn't really put up, CJ Stroud had a few Heisman worthy plays, or just, that number 1 pick in the draft type of plays that kind of extended some drives late as well. But it was really the running game for them. And, ever since then, with the Notre Dame offense getting into check at least a little bit, it's not, necessarily a strength of theirs per se, but with them being able to put up points against some of the better teams on their schedule, their defense hasn't had to see the field as much as it did early on in the season when they did lose to, Marshall, for example. And then when they had to, even though they only gave up, 16 points against Stanford, it felt like their defense was on the field way too much. And it just, became a factor in some of those games. So I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for. I'll be honest with you. I came in here expecting to sort of, talk more about the North Carolina game, because I think that actually matches up well with the way USC is sort of built. They're kind of like, I guess, UNC on steroids. It's kind of the way I would describe it. And that's where I think Notre Dame matches up well against USC, because I do think they're going to be able to run the football. I do think they're going to be able to keep USC in check more so than other teams on the USC schedule have been. To be completely honest with you, I don't see USC putting up 40 points in this game, which they've done against most of their opponents. And I think Notre Dame is going to be able to control a lot of the clock, assuming they play a good football game. So if I was going to look at a game plan from either perspective, it would be the UNC game plan for Notre Dame.
Yeah, you led into a few of the questions that I was thinking of. First, how many minutes time of possession do you think Notre Dame needs to hit in terms of a target to win this game? I'm thinking at least 38 for Notre Dame to win this game.
Yeah, I would say, for sure in the 30s. But they're an interesting team because they do control the time of possession, and obviously their running game is a big factor why. But there are times where their running game also scores quickly. And then at the end of the game, they kind of just wear you down to where they don't necessarily have, the time of possession that you would think. But their offensive line and their running backs are just so physical that in the fourth quarter, you can see the defense of the other team getting tired, and then they do 3-and-outs. Notre Dame might even throw some 3-and-outs in there as well, or some, 6 or 7-and-outs where they don't hold the ball for so long. But some of that physicality just really wears on some teams. So I would definitely say in the 30s. I don't know if it has to be in the upper 30s, but I think we're in a similar boat there for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Now USC, that USC's been having an amazing year in terms of turnover differential, committed only for 24 takeaways. So does Notre Dame have to be plus turnovers in terms of the takeaway differential to win this game? Or if I told you right now, turnovers are going to be even in this game, does Notre Dame have to be plus turnovers to win this game?
Yeah, it's probably not the answer you want to hear. I think it could probably be even. It just kind of depends. It's more so like Notre Dame can't turn the football over. I think that's really what it comes down to. So if they both turn the ball over 3 times, that's an even that I wouldn't like, because
0-0 is what Notre Dame's would be fine with.
Yeah, or even honestly, even if it was -1, like if Drew Pine had 1 tipped interception, because he's good for a couple tips at the line of scrimmage weekly. It's just the way it is. He's 5'9".
But USC might not have Eric Gentry, who is the tip interception master, and we've really missed him the past few weeks.
Guarantee you don't need the tip master to have a tip ball against Drew Pine. It's just kind of the way it goes. He's good for 1 a game. He's not necessarily good for an interception or a turnover. One thing I'll give him credit for, even though I'm not his biggest fan, is that he's pretty savvy in the pocket. Outside of that Navy second half, he's been pretty good about avoiding sacks. And he's kind of, I hate calling him this because I'm a big Ian Book guy, but he has a little Ian Book in him when he gets outside of the pocket and can you just don't think he's going to pick up that 8 yards or something like that, but he does. So I'll give him credit for that. But when he's in the pocket and he stares down Michael Mayer like he does 35 times a game, he's good for a couple tipped balls, and some of them turn into interceptions from time to time. So I think to answer your question, I think if it's even like a 0-0, like you mentioned, or even like a -1 either way, where it's not a huge turnover battle on either side, I think either team can win that, to be honest with you.
All right, special teams. Now this is the Halloween horror show for USC going up against Notre Dame, because you might know that USC does not have a special teams coordinator, and it showed against UCLA. 2 missed field goals under 35 yards, a couple of ridiculous pooch kickoffs that gave UCLA great field position, just, total clown car stuff. Like Lincoln Riley thinks he can manage this, and he ain't cutting it. Not in this round. Like everything else, Lincoln Riley is amazing, not on special teams. Mm-hmm. So you have Brian Mason, who is, teaches punt block schemes better than anyone else in the country. I frankly think he should be the Broyles Award winner. Like, really,
I think he should be a semifinalist for sure.
They've announced the semifinalists, but has any assistant coach done a better job in America anywhere this year? I don't think so. But anyway, talk about Notre Dame's special teams, and if USC has 4th and 3 at midfield, in late in the first, early in the second quarter, does USC need to avoid punting just because of what Brian Mason could do to this awful USC special teams unit?
Yeah, I would advise anybody, especially a team like USC, who 4th and 3 is very manageable for them. If it's a situation where it makes sense to go for it, I would probably go for it every time. So he's a damn good special teams coach, and it's honestly not even just in the punt blocks. Their punter is one of the best punters in the country this year. I know a special teams coach doesn't necessarily have a whole lot to do with the punting and the kicking game per se. A lot of that has to do with just the player itself. But they're pretty good in all aspects. The only thing they really don't do is return kickoffs, but honestly, who really does these days? But no, I would say if USC has punted the ball a couple times, I mean, especially with what I've at least heard, I'll be honest with you, I haven't watched too many of USC games this year. I usually keep track of them pretty well, just obviously because of the rivalry. And I live on the West Coast, so I can't stay up to see some of their stuff. But I do know that Lincoln Riley doesn't have a special teams coordinator. I've heard he's not huge on special teams, just in general. He thinks he can win with offense, defense. That's probably music to Brian Mason's ears to kind of echo what you said. So that could be a big deal. And that goes back to the turnover battle. I mean, if Notre Dame is essentially able to flip field position because they block a punt or they block a kick or whatever it may be, that's obviously something that's huge. And it gives Notre Dame a short field. It gives Pine, he doesn't have to necessarily go 80 yards or 90 yards to score a touchdown or put points on the board. And that's great for Notre Dame's offense. So, that's definitely something to look for or look into for this game. 100%.
All right. Now, where USC is extremely confident, let's flip the script and go to where USC should feel really confident in this game. USC's offensive line, when the starters are healthy, as good as any offensive line in the country. And we talked earlier before you came on, Nathan, about Andrew Voorhees and Bobby Haskins getting close to full strength. They've been banged up the past few weeks, but they were close to full strength against UCLA, and you saw the USC offense do its thing, rock and roll. So how does Marcus Freeman go about generating a pass rush, or just on a broader level, making life difficult for Caleb Williams in this game, with USC's offensive line being, all things considered, maybe not perfect shape, but in relatively good shape? What's the tactic for Marcus Freeman to break through the USC offensive line and cause some problems?
Yeah, I mean, first things first, they're pretty good at getting to quarterbacks with 4. I mean, Isaiah Foskey, one of the best defensive ends in the country. They have some good interior pass rush with Jason Adamalola, who actually missed last game, but Marcus Freeman said he's probable to play. Riley Mills is a good interior pass rusher. Justin Adamalola, who's the twin of Jason Adamalola, he starts on the strong side defensive end. So those guys know how to get to the quarterback, and it's definitely one of the better defensive lines in the country, at least in my opinion. But they also blitz a lot. They have a lot of linebackers that they blitz all the time. Maris Leofau plays closer to the line of scrimmage, and completely, in all honesty, he's better when he's closer to the line of scrimmage. And there's a lot of rumors that he might actually flip to Viper next year, which is sort of Isaiah Foskey's spot, or at least in some kind of role for them, instead of being an off-ball linebacker. JD Bertrand is a pretty good timed blitzer. So they'll definitely throw some things his way. Al Golden has some interesting schemes that he brought in from the NFL where he does like to blitz linebackers. He'll throw a safety blitz in there every now and then, and it has burnt them from time to time, but it also has worked from time to time. He'll throw secondary blitzes outside of the safety, so corners, slot corners specifically. I think Tariq Bracy got home on Saturday against BC. So they'll definitely do some interesting scheme blitzes here and there. I guess that really answers your question. Is I think Notre Dame's pretty confident that they can get there with 4, but if not, they will blitz a decent amount as well.
So USC's offensive line, USC's offense more broadly is a USC strength. Let's talk about Notre Dame's weaknesses. One of the weaknesses that I identify in this, and quarterback's a little bit too easy because there's a lot more to an offense than the quarterback, and of course you need to look at the whole puzzle and how all the pieces fit together. I think a key weakness in this game is, where does Notre Dame get pass catching from someone other than Michael Mayer? Because he's so good, he's so transcendent, but like Notre Dame doesn't have the speed burner. And USC going against Arizona with its great wide receivers, going against UCLA with all the athleticism that the Bruins could throw at them. Notre Dame isn't as athletic, and at least doesn't have a home run threat that's going to scare USC the way other USC opponents have had. So who is if USC double teams Michael Mayer, which I would imagine Alex Grinch is going to do a reasonable amount of the time, who's the other pass catcher who needs to step up for the Fighting Irish in this game?
So I'll be honest with you. I think it actually is pretty easy, and it is a quarterback issue. again, I hate. I'm not huge on ripping on college players specifically because it's certainly not Drew Pine's fault. He is what he is. He got recruited to play Notre Dame. He wasn't really supposed to be the starter, but it is. It is what it is. Braden Lindsey, for example, his stats won't show you, but he's probably having the best year of his career at Notre Dame simply because he's been open so many times and just been missed. And he is a speed burner. He's a legit, probably low 4.3 guy. And he's been overthrown, underthrown, whatever it is, several times on the season. That goes back to when Tyler Buckner was playing quarterback as well. I don't know if you watched the Navy game at all, but he had a really nice touchdown reception.
He made the Ty Prothro catch, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So that was that was a good moment for him as kind of a 5th-year senior. He really deserved that. But he's a guy that can definitely get open deep. And it can be hit. But you are right. They have more of the possession style receiver styles. Lorenzo Styles is a true sophomore. He definitely has some speed to him. He's had some drop issues this year. Definitely some hand issues. And that's been a big reason why maybe he hasn't had some of those vertical, or he hasn't really added that vertical threat for Notre Dame. They really just don't throw it to him in those situations. They kind of use him on jet sweeps and different things like that. But really, I mean, at least in recent weeks, Deion Colsey has really stepped up specifically as a third down specialist for them. He's like a 6'3", 6'4" guy that can go up and get it, more of a possession type. Jaden Thomas, kind of the same thing. He has had a few deep balls this year where he's made some big plays on. I think actually specifically against Navy in the first half, he had like a 40-yard touchdown catch. But really what I'm interested in seeing is if Tobias Merriweather plays. He's been out the last 2 games. He's a true freshman. He had a big touchdown catch against Stanford. He was starting to come on before the concussion that he got. And like I say, he's missed the last 2 games. He's one guy that not only has some size, but definitely has some speed to his game. And he can be a guy that, to be completely honest, might surprise the coach just because he's been on the field a little bit, but he only has 1 catch on the season. And it's because kind of before this, what was it, like 3 or 4 games into the season, wasn't playing much, then started playing, got some snaps, had the big play against Stanford, then got hurt. And it's more of a quarterback issue. And that's really the only reason he has 1 catch. But he's one guy that if he does play this week could surprise some people. And at least if you are going to double team Mayer, I'm of the opinion that they don't have necessarily the depth at wide receiver, but they certainly have some talent at wide receiver that can beat you that hasn't been utilized to the fullest extent.
Let's talk about Notre Dame's offensive line. Just in terms of charting the course of this group's evolution over the course of the season, obviously struggled to a certain extent. I mean, again, the quarterback problems, are overshadowing everything else that's happened for the offense this season. It's hard to ignore that. But like the offensive line, with Drew Pine struggling, wasn't able to just hammer Cal, wasn't just able to, blow away the opponents that Notre Dame struggled against in the first half of the season. When Notre Dame was really struggling, I didn't, watch too much of the Irish because they weren't playing in a featured game, with all the losses they were picking up. I did pay attention to the Syracuse game. I also paid attention to the Clemson game. It seemed as though, particularly in the Syracuse game, as the lead into the Clemson game in this second half surge for the Irish, I saw Notre Dame really stepping up on the offensive line in that game. That's just kind of my impression, but I don't follow this team, with a fine tooth comb. You Sure. do. Well, what do you think was the moment when this offensive line became noticeably better in your estimation?
Yeah, so game 1, they were missing their top guy, or at least their perceived top guy going into the season, and Jarrett Patterson. He didn't play against Ohio State, and honestly, he's probably played banged up most of the season, but as the season's gone on, he's got significantly better. The cohesion across the offensive line's gotten better. I would say it honestly started about the second half of Cal. The Cal game in itself doesn't look great. They only won 24-17 or whatever it was. But the second half, the offensive line really dominated. The running game started picking up. And then the next game was the UNC game where obviously UNC, at least early on in the season, I don't even think they played defense. I don't know what you would call it, but it certainly wasn't defense. It's probably gotten a little bit better as the season's gone on. But they completely thrashed UNC and BYU in consecutive games, not only on the ground, but through the air. Actually, those were probably back-to-back Drew Pine's best games. And then actually outside of that, I mean, really just the Navy second half where they decided to zero blitz every single play. And it really got into Drew Pine's head. Even against Stanford, when they did lose that game, a lot of that really was the quarterback issue versus, in my opinion, the offensive line issue. So I would say it started about the second half of Cal, and it's, for the most part, it's been very good since. Like, honestly, I'll take it a step further. I was a little bit surprised that they didn't make the Joe Moore Award semifinalist or finalist, whichever one came out. And I know USC did. I was a little shocked just with the way that Notre Dame's offensive line has been since the Cal game that they weren't a part of that.
Nathan Urbach here from Golden, not Domers podcast, because that would be too obvious. That doesn't make any sense. It's too obvious. Golden Homers. There's irony in there. Baseball fans, they're homers. Notre Dame homers. There you go.
Yeah,
I should never get that messed up. Nathan, we appreciate you being here. I've got a couple questions more from a broad scale. One being that Marcus Freeman's done a remarkable job getting off on this, getting started on this 2023 recruiting cycle. So how much does this game factor into successes as we get we are just about 3 weeks away from National Signing Day, and in regards to recruiting battles directly with USC?
I don't really think they're battling USC right now for any 2023 guys specifically. Definitely some 2024. For example, Jason Robinson is a USC commit. He was on Notre Dame's campus. I think it was this past weekend with his younger brother. I'm sure he'll be on campus for the USC when he's a SoCal kid. So I bet he'll, or at least maybe not SoCal, but he's a California kid. I'm sure he'll be on campus for the game this weekend. But just for the rest of the season, I'm not sure what they do against USC is going to matter much, whether they get a decommit here or there, or whether they add a kid here or there. They're definitely in on probably 4 or 5 kids remaining in the class. And then Peyton Bowen, who's their 5-star safety, is really the only guy that I think that they could lose that is really significant. And I don't think if they lose 59-0, for example, to USC, I don't think him leaving or staying the game will have much effect on that.
Nathan,
but regardless,
you've been on enough to anticipate this question. So, of course, Notre Dame loses that opener to Ohio State. In regards to a national profile, a lot of people jumped off, started watching other games, and kind of lost track of Notre Dame during this bit of a surge here against the likes of North Carolina, Clemson, and others. So beyond the stars, we'll take away Isaiah Foskey on the defensive side, or a Michael Mayer, and even Audric Estime at running back. Who could be an X factor on either side of the ball for Notre Dame to pull off a slight upset?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I probably mentioned everybody on their roster when Matt was saying stuff. So I'm a big Logan Diggs guy. If you check my Twitter feed out, Logan Diggs is probably, at least in my opinion, maybe their most valuable player outside of Michael Mayer. Just the style of running back that he is, what he does for the offense outside of running the football. He's come back from a shoulder injury this year, where if you look at his stats at the beginning of the season, they weren't amazing, but since then, he's only 302 yards away from a 1,000-yard season, when he barely played the first 4 weeks of the year. And, he's kind of been the lead back starting from, maybe halfway through the season, but they still run Audric Estime a lot. They still run Chris Tyree a lot. In my opinion, he's really their most versatile back. And at this point, he's kind of their lead back. At least the guy that you 100% know is going to get the 15 to 20 carries every game. Estime kind of comes in more in spurts, where he's there for like 4 or 5 touches at a time, and he's off the field for a little bit. And then Tyree's more of a gad guy. So Logan Diggs, in my opinion, is kind of their X factor on offense. Defense, Brandon Josephs missed the last 2 games with an injury. He was the safety transfer that they had from Northwestern. Previously to that, he had a really good game against Syracuse where he picked off a ball, and then he had another one that got called back because of kind of a phantom, a phantom hold or whatever it was. But so he was starting to really come on for them. So, I mean, if he's supposed to play this week, Marcus Freeman again said he was probable as well, along with a couple other guys, like I mentioned, Jason Adam earlier. So if he plays, he's definitely a guy that makes their secondary much better. So those are probably the two guys I would mention for Notre Dame.
One more, Nathan. Let me throw this one at you. Matt gave you a series of box score questions. If this, then how does this turn out? I'll give you this one. Let's take the running game off the table and say Drew Pine's got to drive at 75 yards in a comfortable amount of time, but the running game is on the shelf. There's not 4 minutes on the clock. There's 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Got to throw the ball. How confident are you in that situation, needing a touchdown down 4 that Drew Pine delivers?
I lost you for a second, Mark. I don't know if it was you or me, but you said, so if there's like 4 minutes left on the clock and they need to throw.
No. So there is not 4 minutes on the clock. The running game is off the board, off the table. It is strictly a passing situation, but there's not 13 seconds left in the game. It's comfortable time for the passing game. 90 seconds to 2 minutes, 75 yards to go, down 4, need a touchdown. Drew Pine's got the game in his hands, on his shoulders. How confident are you that he can deliver?
Not confident at all. I don't know if I could put a number on it. Well, it's weird though. Ironically enough, they've actually had, they haven't really had that game situation yet this season where they've been, down by 3 or a touchdown or whatever to go up, to go win it or tie it at the end of the game. For that to really I don't know. It's kind of a weird scenario because that hasn't really happened yet. I guess I would say I wouldn't be confident, but I would also somewhat be like, okay, Michael Mayer might be able to just go make a play because he's that good. But yeah, no, overall, it's just, I wouldn't have a lot of confidence if there was, a minute and a half left in the game, like no timeouts, for example, or something like that. And, they need to put up 6 or 7 to win the game. I wouldn't necessarily be too confident.
So you want to defend a lead or have 4.5 minutes on the clock so your running game can factor in.
Yeah. Perfect world. If they're down, you have, 4 or 5 minutes to work with where you can utilize the running game to get down the field.
Anything else, Matt?
I'm good. Nathan, I was thinking at the beginning of this that, you're staying up late in the Midwest, but you mentioned that, you're on the West Coast. So, but still, you're staying up late with us and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, grew up going to Notre Dame USC games at USC more so than anything. So that's my story. But no, Nathan, I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, appreciate you stopping by, man.
All right,
enjoy the game.
Thank you.
There you have it, Matt. Again, thank you so much for getting things started here tonight. We had a excellent show, thanks to you. And a good crowd on hand. So, folks, for those,
lots of people. Just want to say, lots of people showed up, and that's with me starting the show with Notre Dame graphics that Tony Altomare had to come in and clean up. So, hey, you guys are the best, being loyal to the program, the brand that Mark Rogers has created. He didn't have to start the show. It was a team effort with me and Tony and cast of thousands, just trying to get everything cleaned up. Thanks for your loyalty and watching our show tonight, even though Mark didn't start it. That's a testament to Mark and what he has built here at the Voice of College Football.
And definitely a testament to Tony and Tim. Thank you so much for that. Yes. Tony, thanks for working out the graphics. You are a master at that, among other things, of course. And we are also simulcasting on the Notre Dame channel as well. So we got a little Irish flavor there. So folks that are just stopping by for maybe the first time, we actually do this every week, 52 weeks a year. We've done it 29 consecutive here with Matt. So Matt, this is only possible because of you. So stop on by, everybody, next Monday night, 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, USC Trojans Live. Should be a bang-up show with the Notre Dame recap and looking ahead possibly to a Pac-12 championship game. To a Pac-12 championship game.
We'll definitely have a game to preview.
Yes, I'm getting the playoffs and the championship scenario in conference mixed up there. Yes, USC is clinched. They are in the Pac-12 championship game. So much to talk about again next week. College football playoffs are revealed the rankings reveal, of course, on Tuesday night. Matt, thank you so much for this. Everybody head on over to College Gridiron Coast to Coast, a podcasting network that both myself and Matt are fully entrenched in. And Matt delivers his podcast on the Pac-12 and some Mountain West sprinkled in on Get Off My Pylon. So check it out. They're on College Gridiron Coast to Coast.
And Mark has Big Ten Paradigm, and we're closing on the Big Ten championship game, and of course, Michigan, Ohio State. So you want to get the Michigan, Ohio State preview from Mark Rogers at his College Gridiron Coast to Coast show, Big Ten Paradigm. And of course, subscribe to, like, and share the USC channel and the main channel here at the Voice of College Football.
Great stuff. We're going to do our very best to take you guys all the way through rivalry week on the main channel in particular. And as Matt had pointed out last week, it's same goes this week. Trojans Wire is the place to be to get yourself set for USC and Notre Dame, right, man?
Big game, baby. And of course, we're working with Fighting Irish Wire, and want to give a shout out to Nick Shepkowski, the editor at Fighting Irish Wire. He does a great job covering Notre Dame. So he and I, we're going to do some, game prediction pieces together. We're doing some USC Notre Dame history pieces together. We have two USC Notre Dame podcasts, one on the game and another a special program on with the director of the Knute Rockne Memorial Society. And so for our Los Angeles folks watching this from LA, there's going to be a Knute Rockne Memorial Society lunch and awards celebration this Friday at the Cathedral Plaza, 555 West Temple Street in Los Angeles. There are going to be some honorees, and it's John Hewart, 1964 Heisman Trophy winner. He's going to be there as an honoree. Digger Phelps' daughter, who's married to former Major League pitcher Jamie Moyer, she's going to be an honoree. It's really a great list of honorees, and so that's 11 a.m. Friday, November 25th. The Knute Rockne Memorial Society. Of course, Knute Rockne and his wife loved Southern California. They wanted to, they started the USC rivalry with Howard Jones in 1926 on the heels of the 1925 Rose Bowl between Notre Dame and Stanford. Knute Rockne against Pop Warner, one of the most celebrated games in college football history. So they're like, Knute Rockne has a relationship with Southern California as the Notre Dame USC rivalry grew. So the Knute Rockne Memorial Society is gathering in Los Angeles to pay tribute to that part of Knute Rockne's heritage and the growth of the Notre Dame USC rivalry, but also to what Knute Rockne did in building Notre Dame. So that's a great event if you can go to it. And we encourage you to go to rocknesociety.org. But anyway, we have a podcast on that, working with Fighting Irish Wire, as well as our game preview. Tons of stuff, Trojans Wire and Fighting Irish Wire. You want to check it all out this week. It's going to be a whole lot of fun.
Jamie Moyer once broke my heart during a Game 5 of the American League Division Series back in 2001 as he soft-tossed his way through a Cleveland Indians murderer's row, but they just couldn't touch him that day as he just painted the outside corner with those 78-mile-an-hour fastballs.
That's right. And then, of course, the Mariners flopped against the Yankees in the ALCS and are still waiting for that first World Series. And that was my dagger. That was my gut punch moment. Yes, so we both had a gut punch moment in October of 2001.
Absolutely. For the team that won 116 games. That's right.
Yeah, so that was 2001. And then 1 year later, we had a USC quarterback winning the Heisman Trophy on the back of a big game against Notre Dame in the Los Angeles Coliseum. Will history repeat itself with Caleb Williams against the Irish this year?
Folks, check out the chat there. We have dropped the link to Trojans Wire. Catch Matt's work right there on Trojans Wire. We have made it easy for you. All you have to do is click on the link and you're all set. Put it somewhere where you will remember it, have it available to you anytime you want to check out Matt's work at Trojans Wire. Matt, again, we couldn't do it without you each and every week, but especially this week. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
And we couldn't do it without you, loyal viewers of the Voice of College Football. It makes me feel really happy that you are all joining, this show as a testament and tribute to the brand that Mark Rogers has built here at the Voice of College Football. Thank you, viewers.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you back here on next Monday night. Then, of course, USC Notre Dame post game right here at the Voice of College Football on Saturday as well. And we are going nuts on rivalry week. So be in touch with all of our channels here at the Voice of College Football. See you next week.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Absolutely.